There we go. We're on.
Right. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Lovely to see you. Thank you for turning out this evening on such a cold evening outside. We got an extra special talk this evening. That's our second attempt.
Yeah.
2 weeks later. For those of you who don't know, it wasn't our fault that we couldn't get in the building previously. It was mixed up in the bookings with the library. But ably sorted out by Sue. So thank you for sorting that out, Sue, for rearranging for tonight. And also thanks to Linda for your patience as well. And coming back 2 weeks later. Those of you who've given a talk before, you know what it's like when you build yourself up to doing that talk and then it doesn't happen. It really is an anticlimax. So thank you, Linda, for coming back and talking to us again. Usual COVID rules apply, and I noticed that you're all socially distanced, and anybody that's watching us at home, we're all very safely socially distanced here. Masks, you can take them off when you're sitting down. Just wear them when we're moving around. Obviously, if you want to keep them on throughout, that's entirely up to you. Okay. But you can, if you just put them on when we're moving around, that's excellent. And of course, for the time being, we've got no refreshments again, so just remember, just bear that in mind. So I think that's the only parish notices we've got. January we haven't sorted out the meeting yet. We've got the meeting date, but haven't sorted out the speaker yet. Basically because we've been waiting to see what happens. Obviously with our friendly new variant, or our very unfriendly new variant. So as soon as we know more, then we'll let you know more for the January meeting. But I think at the moment we can probably say, can't we, that the intention is to go ahead face to face again, unless things drastically change. Let's keep everything crossed and let's pray hard to everybody and everything we can possibly think of that we can get together in January. Okay, and without further ado, Linda, I think that you need no introduction. Linda's been a member of the Society for many years, excellent supporter of the Society, member of the Society Council as well, and she brilliantly does these talks for us as well. And this is this must be your third one, your third face-to-face?
I think so, yeah.
It's got to be, isn't it? Yeah. And of course Linda did them online for us as well. So without further ado, Linda Gautrey.
Okay, thank you. This time I'm doing a talk that's really not off the top of my head. I've got to refer to my notes. Totally out of my comfort zone. I'm apologising in advance. One, I'm useless with names. I'm useless with languages. And there's some interesting names, as you'll see, that turn up. And also dates. So I've got to look at my notes. I did tidy them up a bit. I put it a bit neatly as I ripped them out in the book. But okay. Right. So what I chose is something that I've been really interested in for a long time. I'm a scientist, and some of you may know I was a teacher for a very long time. It seems like a very long time. And I want to talk about women scientists. Okay, I'll come back to that cartoon a bit later on, so have a look if you haven't already. Okay. Now, often when I introduce science to a group of new pupils, I was often getting to draw a scientist. And you can safely say that the vast majority, when they hold them up, will look perhaps not as good as that, but they will have goggles on, they will have a lab coat, and they will be male. Okay, without fail. So I would question, I would challenge them. So do all scientists have to wear goggles? And then have a bit of a discussion, and obviously they don't. Do they all have to wear lab coats? No, they don't. Do they have to be male? And then that's where you get a little bit more of a discussion. I then ask them if they can name a female scientist. If I'm lucky, I usually get Marie Curie. Okay, but that's usually about it. Occasionally I've had some that come up with some really interesting ones, but mostly it's no. But then if you really ask them to name male scientists, then you probably find they'd come up with Einstein. And then not many, but anyway, I'm making my point. So why is it that when we consider the history of science, why is it that women don't feature in it? Why is it all men? And why is it mainly white males as well? But that's perhaps a different story. So why is it that men feature strongly but women don't? Well, there's one of the reasons. Women were, you were at home. Women were the ones that looked after the family, that had the babies, and let's face it, until historically recently, they had lots of babies. So really, they didn't really have time or energy to do much else. So they were told, that's your place in the home. And really, from a lot of people, from a lot of men, it was said that women were very much inferior. They were weaker. It was the weaker sex. Let's face it, they had loads more diseases. Menstruation, for example. They counted that as a disease. All the problems with childbirth and having children. They were all problems, and they held women back. Okay. Men did not think that they could do science or could even think in some respects. So, women really couldn't be anything other than the baby machine. But I want to show you that there are a lot of women scientists out there that have not been credited. Okay? And they're not the ones that don't just make the sandwiches or make the tea. So, let's have a think of some. That's a very, when I taught, there was one of the science teachers that would always say, oh yeah, I know, they're the ones that make the tea, and I'll come back to this lady later on. Okay, there's a picture, photograph of very prominent scientists. I'll have to reverse this. Aileen Pollock of the New York Times published this picture. This is in 1927. Okay, prominent scientists. Don't know if you spotted.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
That's Marie Curie. Okay. So all those, and look, white males, and then you've got Marie Curie. Okay. So, have there been any other scientists that are women? If you do searches on the internet, you'll find loads. You really will. Loads of different pictures. So let's explore. All I want to do tonight is show you a few. And I won't go into details about them because I want to get through quite a few of them. Right, there's the first one. Edwina. Does it sound right? Born 2285 BCE. Now, when I did this research, I didn't realise they changed it from BC to BCE. That's before the Common Era. This is what they call it now. I didn't realise they changed it. But anyway, so she was around a very long time ago. She was actually the daughter of King Sargon in the city of Ur. Never heard of any of those places when I was looking at this. But she was actually made the high priestess by the king, her father. But not just being high priestess, she actually observed nature. And she actually contributed a lot to the development of agriculture. A lot of practices today, a lot of the development of different crops that we grow. She was very much responsible for that, when we grew them and things like that, lots of observations. And there's a lot of information going back that far. There's a lot of even written evidence of her contribution to science. So she did a lot. Now, at this point, it's also can be said that people often think that women were responsible for the development of agriculture because, of course, they were the ones that did the gathering. Men went off and did the hunting, women went and gathered, and as people settled, they observed and they grew crops to suit themselves and things like that. So often they don't get enough credit for actually developing agriculture. That's just one of the many things. Let's jump also now to the Greeks, which is the 4th century. There was a lot of them that contributed to medicine, mainly to women's problems and those sort of things. But here's somebody. This is Hypatia of Alexandria. Now there's a lot of controversy on what she looked like. There's 3 images of what she could have looked like. They don't really know, but they know about her. And again, she was an astronomer and a mathematician. She actually produced loads of devices to measure density. She also developed the astrolabe, which was something for ship's navigation. And because of who she was, unfortunately, she was actually murdered by a mob of Christians. So there was a lot of danger in women becoming scientists or becoming anybody in prominence. Okay. Let's try and make sure I keep all this in order. I have numbered the pages, unlike somebody else we've seen recently. Anyway. Okay, let's jump forward quite a bit of history. Okay, this is 1098 to 1179. This is Hildegard of Bingen, I think it's pronounced. She was an abbess. She was actually given to the church by a family at the age of 8. And this is because she had visions. However, she went on to do a huge amount of medicine with natural history and lots of religious stuff as well. But she was very much known for all this medicine, folk wisdom, and again that sort of linking to things and ideas that women did a lot of the natural medicine, helping their families. She was actually only one of 4 women to date that have been made a doctor of the church. So that was what, 1098 she was born in, and there's only been one of 4 women. Okay. Now, lots of women at the time were developing all sorts of ideas, natural medicine. They would help their families, but they'd also do other things as well, and there were potions for all sorts of things. So a lot of women at the time were actually accused of witchcraft, because after all, remember, women couldn't be clever, so this had to be unnatural. Okay, so a lot of women at the time, all the way through history, have been accused of witchcraft, but they've just been developing ideas, using natural medicines, and being clever. Okay, so let's look at some other scientists then. Let's go to 1650 to 1600, sorry, 1664. And this lady, this is Maria Kunitz. She was actually educated by her father. She actually did a lot about astronomy. I don't know whether the astronomers in here have heard of that. Yeah. She did loads of work. You've heard of Kepler? You heard of Kepler?
Yeah.
She simplified his, she corrected his work and simplified it. But we've heard of Kepler, but perhaps we haven't heard of her. So she did it a lot, and she produced a lot of information, a lot of books. Okay, so she was educated by her father, and obviously quite a rich family. Okay, this is Maria Gaetana Agnesi. I'm really struggling with these names. 1718 to 1799. Again, her father taught her science, but this time it was more like she was used to entertain his guests. So he'd bring out his daughter and say, look what she can do, and she would tell them things and talk about things. And she actually produced lots of different books, but one in particular on calculus, which she actually dedicated to women, because she wanted to try and encourage other women to be educated as well. She was again lucky because her father was rich and her father could teach her. Okay? Just to show it's happening all the way around the world, not just in the West. This is, I really struggle with this one. Wang Zhenya, 1768 to 1797. She's in China. Again, astronomy and maths. She was educated by her grandfather, but she taught herself a huge amount of information. She got the books, she taught herself. And she actually did a lot of work on lunar eclipses. Okay. Here's page 1, all the way. So, you get the impression that to be a scientist and to actually do anything and study, you had to come from a rich family and have a father or grandfather that could actually teach you, or wanted to teach you, or even felt that they could, because don't forget, a lot of people at the time, a lot of men would have said their daughters, it would be wasted on them because they're never going to understand, and what can they do with it anyway? So let's look at somebody you might have heard of, Lavoisier. Okay. Anton Lavoisier could not have completed his work without his wife, Marianne. Now, they married when she was 13.
13.
13. This was she was born 1758 and died in 1836. Now, we all know that he's often referred to as the father of chemistry, isn't he? Well, he couldn't have got there without her. She actually learned Latin and English so that she could translate books so that he could use them in his studies. She actually contributed, she actually did a lot of the work, she did loads of the work. She didn't just make the sandwiches, okay, or the tea. She did lots of work and helped. And this was proved. She was also a very good artist. And a lot of the artwork that she did, she put herself in the pictures to show that she was doing a lot of the work as well. Okay. We heard this one. I had of Robert Boyle.
Oh, yeah.
This is Lady Ranelagh. Okay, this is his sister. She was 12 years older than him. She was his mentor. She helped him. She helped him and encouraged him. She got him to set up his laboratory. So without her, Robert Boyle wouldn't have been able to study and he wouldn't have been able to come up with all the things that he did. This is 1615 to 1691. She was actually well respected for her knowledge, for her own knowledge, and contributed a huge amount to chemistry and medicine, and did have some work published, but not much. Robert Boyle refers to her in a lot of his books, but only as in a pseudonym, never by her name. I'm pressing the wrong thing. Okay, might have heard of this one as well. Caroline Lucretia Herschel. Yeah. She's recognised, this one, she's recognised with her brother. A lot of astronomy. She was at first employed as his housekeeper. He actually rescued her from their home, from their family home, because she was being mistreated. So he took her in, she became his housekeeper, and then learnt the science and helped him. And she actually found 8 new comets. She actually received, it's quite amazing, £50 per year. So this was in the 1750s, 1848. £50 was a lot of money. She received that from the Crown, and she's actually credited to be the first professional scientist, female scientist, just getting that money. And even after his death, she carried on getting this money and carried on contributing to science. So we're at the stage really in the mid-16th and 18th centuries, we've got a huge amount of science going on. There was loads, Copernicus, Harvey, loads and loads of science, but there was very few opportunities for women to actually study. They couldn't go to universities or anything else, they couldn't go to schools, or they weren't educated, they weren't allowed. Even those that have got privilege, rich families that could perhaps afford to. So certainly working class families, there was no chance at all. Okay, this is a waxwork of Anna Morandi, 1714 to 1774. She married an anatomical professor and she helped him with his work. They made wax models for teaching, for all sorts of different things. And after his death, she carried on producing these wax models. And there's a couple of the wax models that she produced. So she was very much respected for that work. Okay. A couple of others you may not have heard of. Got Dorothea Erzleben, possibly the first woman doctor in Germany. Now, of course, for anybody to study medicine and to become a doctor, to be credited for it, you had to go to the medical schools. You had to go to the schools that are recognised, for example, in Germany, the special schools. Women were not allowed to go, of course. So she managed to, again, get herself educated, and again, but from a rich family, her father helped. We've got, the next one is Laura Bassi. She was very much involved in physics. And again, both of these had very rich fathers that could help them. So far we've got families with privileges that could actually just about allow their daughters to go and study. And sometimes these daughters would marry into a situation where, they could be encouraged. Just think about all the others that we lost out there that could have gone on to develop things and were really clever, but of course couldn't because they weren't in rich families. And I know that says the same for men as well, really. So let's look at a totally different one. Okay. This good-looking gentleman here is John Barrett. In 1766, 2 ships sailed forth, okay, going out and exploring under the control of Louis Antoine de Bougainville. Now, botanists might have heard of Bougainville. They went out and studied, they went to Africa, South America, they went to lots of different places. So they went on, this was a 3-year voyage. Now, think about it, at the time, those big ships with sails, they took loads of crew, didn't they? There was loads of people, men on board. Of course, we've got here, Jean was actually Jean, a woman. And it's actually said that for 3 years she went undiscovered. So they all thought she was a man. She actually worked with the other naturalist on board, Commerson, and they shared a cabin. Now, it's not actually written whether he understood that she was a she. It doesn't really say. But later on, after all their voyages and their discoveries, together with, and after Commerson's death, Bougainville, I don't think I said that right either, he actually spoke up for her, and she actually got a pension from the Navy, which obviously helped her survive and helped her so she could continue with her studies. She was a really good botanist. Okay, so, and there's lots of things that she discovered because of her voyages. Okay, can you imagine being on a ship? I mean, you can visualise those ships with all those men, and she just remained undiscovered for 3 years. Anyway, amazing. Okay, this lady, Marie Sibylla Meron, she actually paid for her own voyages. So she paid for the ships and she went off, and again, she did a lot of botany and zoology, lots of insects. She again went to different places, mainly Africa, and she actually, instead of just going in and looking for herself, she actually employed the local people, and they helped her a huge amount. They told her about the natural medicines and natural things that were in there, so she learned a lot and she managed to publish a lot as well. They also told her about herbs that we use to abort babies, and this was very much used with the slave trade, so that slaves would not give birth, so their babies wouldn't be born into slavery. So there was a lot of information, and she was linked with that. Incidentally, women were not encouraged to go to hot countries. That was not a good thing for them to do, because it was said by men that their periods would get worse. So they'd be more ill if they went into hot countries, obviously. Anyway. Okay. At the time, it was very much accepted that botany, if we're going to allow women to be scientists, botany was quite a good one to allow them to actually study. So botany and some biology as well. This is Sarah Bordish Lee, 1791 to 1856. She and her husband explored Africa, and there was a load of books published, some of them later on in her name. She published under a male name earlier, but later on she did publish under her own name. Okay. So in the 19th century, we saw technology improving. We saw the printing press, so printing was cheaper. So more people could then learn to read. And this really led to, of course, more women wanting to learn. Okay? And so far, we've actually talked about, actually, if I just go back a slide, we talked about all these, the rich people going out studying because they can afford to do so. Incidentally, other topics. So women would write books on botany, but they would sneak in other topics into their books. Things to do with domestic information and morals. And this next person's quite amazing. Oh, it's gone the wrong way. Elizabeth Wollstonecraft, Emily. I don't know whether anyone's heard of her. No. She was actually working class, a working class mother. So she actually is quite different now. From up to this point, we've seen mainly people of privilege being able to study. This lady, working class. And as you can see, she was a lot of politics to do this, involved in the suffragette movement. She actually tried to organise and tried to encourage women's education. She campaigned a lot, in particular for the repeal of the Contagious Disease Act. In my reading, I found out so many things that were really against women. It's just quite incredible. This act allowed women sex workers to be taken in by the police and looked at very intensely and searched and really found to see if they had any diseases, and then they were taken and confined. The women, not the men that they were seeing, just the women. So this lady really tried to repeal that act. She wrote loads of books on botany, because again, women were allowed to do botany, but she actually targeted children with her books. And not only was it about botany, but she actually used it to actually teach them about reproduction, teach them about domestic and morals. So it's quite amazing. She actually got this through. Okay. So she used her books on botany to educate about lots and lots of other things. Quite an amazing woman, really. Now, looking at, you could go sort of all different places and look at different women scientists. But I thought I'd next sort of talk about nursing, because nursing is something we associate with women. We don't necessarily associate them as scientists, but of course there were a lot of scientists who were nurses, and a lot of advances through their practices. But it took the American Civil War to get nursing really to be recognised in medicine, in particular in America. Many women taught themselves, so they were self-taught. They didn't go off to learn it at universities, they were self-taught. And a lot of these, as you can see, were actually from slavery, and they actually had a lot of information from Africa and a lot of their knowledge of herbs and cures from there, and they used it to help in the American Civil War. And this was, they passed that down. So nursing, and of course we all know about a very famous nurse, Florence Nightingale, but again, she's very much credited with changing nursing, but she also developed all sorts of other things, collected a huge amount of data. Oh, that's proper scientist, isn't it, collecting data? And presenting it. She is credited for inventing the pie chart. Basically, she collected the data and presented it in a way that men could understand. Sorry, politicians could understand. Okay, and obviously changed a lot of nursing because of that. Okay. Mary Eliza Mahoney, 1845 to 1926. She was the first black woman to receive the nursing degree. Anna Fisher Bruckelmann, okay, another German doctor at a similar sort of time. And then, of course, we've got Elizabeth Blackwell. Heard of Elizabeth Blackwell? She was the first doctor, okay, British, but first doctor in America. She was accepted into medical school. So she went along, she wanted to learn, she went to medical school and said, I'd like to enrol. And they were going, no, you can't, you're a woman. And they were all laughing. And they actually let her in as a joke. Certainly the joke was on them because she qualified, showed them up brilliantly, she showed that she could do it. After that, unfortunately, they no longer let women in. Well, it was quite a long time before they actually did let more women in. Okay. Oop, wrong way around. Josie, oh, this is even worse, this one. Anna Debai Golparo. Okay, she was from India. She actually left India because she was not allowed to learn. There was no way she could get into any of the medical schools in India at all. So she left and went to America. She was actually paid for. They actually got people in India to help pay for her. And she actually became the first Hindu doctor. And that was in 1883. Okay. Sorry. Elizabeth, the picture in the middle, is Elizabeth Garrett Anderson. She was the first UK doctor in this country, so the first woman to become a doctor in this country. And that was, she was born 1836, 1917. Okay. So moving on up, we've got the 20th century. We've got, well, moving towards the 20th century. We've got this lady. This is Dorothea Klumka, an astronomer. Women scientists feature a lot in astronomy, or they did in a lot of the research I did. I'm sure I could have gone to different directions and found others. But she was in 1899, she talked to the Congress of Women in London. She was actually she described this time. She was born in 1861 and died in 1942. She described this time as the time of computer women, which I thought was a really sort of funny way of expressing it, the first use of the word computer, or lady computers, they're often called. And what they did was these large number of women were employed, sort of, they didn't get a lot of money at all, but they did lots of measuring and calculations at observatories. So there was an opportunity at last for women, because at this time there were more women getting to university, graduating, but with no jobs, nowhere to go. They actually had somewhere to go and something to do that was connected to science. And around the world there were huge numbers of these places. Every observatory had these lady computers, a large number of ladies that were actually, and it says hundreds and hundreds of them measuring observations. But they were very, very poorly paid. Okay. Incidentally, at the time, before women, it was usually young boys that were employed before they went off to be proper scientists. So they had these women. And I think we've seen that recently in some films, which I think I'll come back to in a bit. Okay, this is Henrietta Swan Leavitt. She, 1885 to 1900, she discovered, this is quite amazing, 1,777 plus variable stars. Now, I'm a biologist, I'm thinking variable stars, what's the significance and all that? But she explained the relationship in the variation of the magnitude and the period of variation. So hopefully that means something to the astronomers. But she showed the relationship between all that. Wilhelmina Fleming, so she's part of this team. Wilhelmina Fleming, she found 10 nova, 300 plus variable stars, 59 nebula, including the Horsehead Nebula. Now, I didn't realise that it was a woman that discovered the Horsehead Nebula. There's a picture of the Horsehead Nebula. Okay. She was part of this team, and these people were only paid paid about 25 cents per hour, and that's just quoting an American one. So paid very little. So again, there's still not many opportunities. There's lots of women out there trying to learn and going against the grain and really learning, but there were not many opportunities for them to actually do anything with their learning. So this led to a huge number of scientists, women scientists in particular, working from home. This is Lillian Moller-Gilbraith, 1878 to 1972. Okay, she actually came up with loads of labour-saving devices. There's a simple one there, it's the pedal bin. But she actually found loads of them. She did this all from her home. Okay. So, back in the beginning I said about how women were stopped or prevented a lot of the time from studying, from having the time, because they were having babies all the time. So, of course, I can't really have this talk without mentioning these two people in particular. It's all to do with birth control. Now, there's a huge sort of range of information linking birth control, politics, and eugenics. Okay, there's a lot of birth control, and the science to do with all that went into eugenics, which is the control of the population, the so-called improving of humanity. But that, I think, is for a different time. I'd just like to say that with child control, birth control, it enables women to take control of their lives. It would give them time, okay, give them more time and energy, okay, to be able to go out there and really learn. This is Mary Stopes, 1880 to 1958, and Margaret Sanger, 1879 to 1966. So these two women were very much involved in birth control and encouraging the education of women and looking at how to prevent and reduce the size of families and so on. Okay. And now, of course, this changed a lot, didn't it? Because of the war, there was a lot of the men were out fighting. They were desperate. They needed people to work in the factories and produce all the things that were needed. So women stepped up. There was a very reluctance. If you look at the politics of this, they were very reluctant really to allow women to do this to begin with. They didn't think they could do it for a start, but of course women stepped up, showed they could do it, and then there was all the problems, of course, when men came back and wanted their jobs back, and women didn't want to just be pushed back into the home. So a lot of the war did change a lot to do with women's liberation and the equality. Equality? Perhaps I shouldn't use that word yet. Okay. So a few more. I think a lot of you will have heard of Lisa Meitner.
Oh, yeah.
1878, that's if I've said it right. 1878 to 1968, to do with fission, nuclear fission. She was actually excluded from the Nobel Prize. Otto Hahn got the prize for it. She didn't, and yet she was very much involved in it. Okay. There were lots of women involved in the Manhattan Project. Leona Woods was one of the first women, and then many others followed. So there was a lot of women involved in all to do with the nuclear power and nuclear bombs and the nuclear, all that side of things. You can tell I'm a biologist, all that side of things. And there was a lot, but again, a lot of them are just not mentioned. Okay. So that's Leanne Woods. This is Emmy Noether. Okay. I hadn't heard of her at all. Maths, so PhD in maths, the first woman in Germany to get a PhD in maths. Okay, so she was around 1882 to 1935. She was actually recognised by Einstein as an extremely intelligent woman. She actually escaped Germany, went to America, and one of the many that actually were rescued, if you like, from the persecution they received in Germany actually got across. There was lots that didn't make it though. She actually though had to lecture under a male name, so she worked at university, she had to lecture under a male name, and somebody else's name. She had to pretend to be this person, so she just turned up. Because of course she wasn't really allowed to lecture. And you know, we're talking about, we're not that far away now in time. Okay? Anyone recognise? If you ask anybody to name people involved in computing, they would probably be able to say, oh yeah, men, computing, Babbage, computer, like that. This is Ada Lovelace. She's credited with the first person to develop computing and programming. Okay, and that's, what's it, 1815 to 1852. So she was the first programmer. That's quite an elaborate picture of her. Okay. I've got to be careful, I've done that page. I won't be reading it again if I don't stick it out. Okay. So, I'm getting a little bit more up to date, and I thought I'd just look at some other science, some other areas of science. Rachel Carson, which as a biologist I know a little bit more about, but she was the lady who produced the book The Silent Spring. It was her that brought to the attention of the world about the fact that pesticides and chemicals are destroying huge numbers of birds out there, which obviously is going to have a huge knock-on effect. So if you like, she was the start of the environmental movement. Okay, and that led to the Clean Air Act, the banning of things like DDT and things like that. So again, a very important person. I then had to stop myself because then I was going to go off into all sorts of biology bits and all sorts of people like Diane Fossey and all the just really important people. But I thought I'd just confine. So I thought, no, I know about them, I'll look for other people. So I decided then, from environment, to go into space. Now, I always, for quizzes and things, try to remember this lady's name. Valentina Tereshkova. Okay, and I think that's about the best one I pronounce, probably the most accurate, hopefully. So 1937, I didn't put when she died on that one. She's actually the first woman in space. So you might think, yippee, women were allowed to go into space, and Russian, so Russia were ahead of the game. It was pure politics. America, of course, they were pushing to get there. America wants to be first, they want to be first. So they thought, well, hang on, let's be first, let's get the first woman in space. We've had Yuri Gagarin, let's get a woman in and be first. So it was pure politics, but that didn't stop her. She did lots and lots of things and lots of discoveries and advanced, obviously, the technology that we needed to go into space. So, what about other ones? That's Sally Ride. Okay. 1951 to 2012, she was the first American woman in space. Now, if I said to you who was the first Brit in space, hopefully you would all say
Helen Sharman.
But you'd be surprised at the number of people would say, oh, but she doesn't count because she wasn't paid by the Brits. She actually went through and went via Russia and on Mir, and they still, in places, quote Tim Peake as the first Brit in space. But no, Helen Sharman was the first Brit in space. She was, she worked as a chemist for the Mars factory for quite a while. She replied to adverts asking for people to go into space. So people, wasn't just women, anybody. And she applied for it, she got it. Intense training, she got up to the Mir space station. Absolutely amazing. Okay. There was actually tens of thousands of women that worked for NASA, all the way through NASA's development. Tens of thousands. Unfortunately, most of them were just credited as clerical work, even though they're doing proper science work, clerical work. And I think some of you might have seen the film that was on not that long ago. It's quite a recent film showing the group of black women that did a lot of the calculations. So they were still talking about, you know, sort of what in the 1960s, a group of computer ladies, and they still have that. Okay, didn't think it was that funny. Okay, so what about some others? Okay, this is Rita Rapp, a physiologist. She worked on information about G-forces. She also came up with a lot on the food that they took up into space as well. We've got Dee O'Hara. She was a medic and she did a lot of work on helping them survive the space journey and look at how their bodies changed. But for a long time, even up to the 1970s and later into the 1980s, in fact quite recently, one of the reasons why there weren't many women getting into the space industry was there were no women's lockers, there was no places. Even there were no things like sports bras. Men, you have no idea. Okay, so these sports, even the space suits, were not made for women. And it was only really recently that they started to have, even on the International Space Station, spacesuits that were more designed for women to wear. Because, you know, I think you've all noticed, men and women do tend to be a bit different. Okay, so all this information, and again, I think we know a few others. I have to go back to my biology. Rosalind Franklin. Okay. She did lots of work on crystallography. She was the one that came up with the data. Her data was passed on by the people she worked with, passed on to, who was it? Watson and Crick, who came up with the molecular DNA. They got the Nobel Prize with her colleague. She didn't, but it said that she didn't because she died before it was given, and they didn't give it posthumously. So I don't know if that was a cop-out or whether or not that was real, but whatever. There's others, loads of others. Dorothy Hodgkin, insulin structure amongst other things. And really, if you start looking, you can pick on any country. I picked on this one because, again, it was an area, in India. I didn't know about it. These are all different scientists from India. And they all have got their own discoveries. Okay. And I chose this picture of this group of scientists because I could safely bet if I showed that picture to a group of students and said, what do you think they do? They would not come up with science. Some of the smarter ones might twig that, I put it up there so it must be, but they wouldn't. So, scientists can be anybody. Okay. I just picked on females. I think men have had such a struggle earlier on as well. And coming right up to date. This is Sarah Gilbert. Okay, she was a key figure in the development of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Great respect. And there are lots of women involved in all of the different vaccines that we're using at the moment and in the information. But if you notice, there are a lot of women actually being the key scientists speaking to everybody. Okay, so do we still have a problem? I could go on for loads of others. In my list, people like Mary Anning, okay, paleontologist, Vera Florence Cooper, an astronomer, Jocelyn Bell Burnell, she discovered pulsars, and Diana Fossey there as well. So perhaps we shouldn't look at why women are not capable, because that's what it was really all about early on. It's really, we should look at why they were never allowed to study science. Okay. found some great YouTubes of just sort of looking at the different scientists. Okay, so I stopped there and I kept going in. I mean, that was it. I added a couple of others over the last week or so. But I thought, no, I had to stop. And I did a search just on Wikipedia, just put in women scientists, and I got that.
Oh,
Quite a few.
And all the different ones, there's all sorts. Any fields that you care to mention, there is somebody here. And what they discovered as well, which is quite amazing. So I've only touched on a tiny few. And these are just, it sort of exploded from the late 1800s really, exploded, so that you could actually learn all walks of life. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed my sort of brief look through about women scientists.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay.
That was excellent again. Absolutely superb. So interesting. And I think it's wonderful to hear these people that have been lost into history, many of them.
Yeah.
And it's so good to keep their names alive. And as you said, it kind of is a problem as well for men with the families, with the wealth that went alongside that. But obviously women face their own particular problems. I think it's fascinating now that we're living in an age, isn't it, that you can delve into those problems and try and redress the balance a little bit, you know, and show what was there.
Because one of the YouTubes, they actually interviewed a lot of women scientists. It was only done about 5 years ago. And they said, you know, sort of, have you had any particular problems? And all the young women, all the young scientists that were interviewed, they all said, no problem whatsoever, no problem. The older ones said, yep. And so it shows, hopefully, that things are getting better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously this is from a male point of view, but I think from when I'm lecturing at university, that, you know, I started lecturing in 2006. Actually, there's been a significant change from then to now, whereas in 2006, to see a woman on the master's schools wasn't unusual, but they were far outweighed by the men. But now, actually, the majority on the master's schools at Birmingham, the mixology, which is I lecture, are women. And there is never any kind of question that, oh, you know, there's woman, there's man. That just doesn't even happen now. Let's hope that's how it continues.
Yeah, we still need to encourage.
Yeah, absolutely,
Especially
definitely.
sort of towards the more male ones like physics and engineering and things like that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it is, I feel, you know, as a teacher all those years, I can see it getting better and more going into science.
Yeah,
That's good.
it is fascinating. Anybody got any questions?
Well, there is a science.
Yes.
And women would have been expected to produce meals and
domestic science, isn't it? That's what
Well, the
they
improvements in, you know, keeping food preservation, and sort of food health, food hygiene. Yeah, it's all connected.
food technology, don't they call it?
Yeah.
In school?
Is that what it is now?
I think it is. I'm not sure.
Anybody got any questions for Linda? Any other questions? I think it's brilliant. And so what I find interesting, and perhaps the astronomers will know this as well, is that there does seem to be, I'm not sure whether it's because of the subject being good at promoting itself, but in the physics and astronomy world, although, you know, people like Herschel were kind of in the background to William Herschel, that there does seem to have been more of a push for the physicists and for the astronomers to be known.
Well, I think it's easier for astronomy. Okay, because you only need a telescope. Whereas chemistry, you need a lab, you need equipment, you need more resources. So I think that's why a lot of them, you know, from what I read, went into maths and to astronomy.
And it's quite delicate, of course, for delicate eyes, isn't it, that they can look through telescopes.
And they can measure, can't they?
Yeah, that's what it's
That was fascinating, finding out about the computer ladies.
I wonder if as well...
The computers you're talking about.
No, they were just a group of ladies.
That's
that
right.
worked.
They were called computers.
They were called computers.
Yeah. They did a specific calculation each.
Yeah. I was just wondering as well, when you were saying about the fathers and the grandfathers supporting them.
Yeah.
And that was back when we were saying sort of late 1600s into the 1700s.
All the way before that as well. This is some
I
examples.
wonder if that was kind of a protection thing. You know, you said about witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
Was almost a protection thing as well, to stop them being labelled as witches or weird. And by doing that, the fathers could promote and protect.
Well, like the one who used their daughter to entertain.
Bring out, you could almost see that being a protection thing as well, couldn't you?
Others came out and played the piano. And spouted.
It really is interesting. Really is interesting. A lot of people there that I didn't know. Anybody got
I
any?
just had a thought, the Lunar Society, it'd be interesting to know if there's women to do with that we don't know about.
I don't know whether anybody know you, but anybody know you with
I've
Lunar
never...
Society.
I'm
Or
not
their
aware of
wives,
anyone.
Their wives helped them, but was sort of never mentioned.
There was one called that. I can't recall what it was about specifically, but obviously lunar moon, it's got to be something to do with that.
No, but I wonder if in the Lunar Society,
All those well-known engineers and scientists.
That was mainly a group of engineer-type scientists. Just on Caroline Herschel, the Herschel Museum at Bath, I mean, it's a two-up-two-down house and a garden, but it's very much worth going to. There are lots of either replicas of the equipment that they used or the equipment that they used. And, you know, it's nice to stand somewhere where he discovered Uranus.
Henrietta Levy, who did the variable star observations, she was observing Cepheid variable stars. The variables are ones that pulse, the light pulses up and down in hours, days, weeks, months, years, some of them. But she was observing these in the Magellanic Clouds, which only sit in the Southern Hemisphere. Effectively, they're two satellite galaxies of the Milky Way. And the Large Magellanic's being torn apart by the Milky Way. Stars are streaming into it, you know, the Milky Way from the Magellanic. And she realised, they didn't know the distance of those clouds at the time, she realised because they were a hell of a long way away, it took the 100-inch at Mount Wilson to resolve them into stellar points. She could assume these variables were all at the same distance. And by doing this, she managed to draw a relationship between period and brightness, or apparent brightness. Once absolute brightness was found out, which was at a distance of 10 parsecs, which is 32.6 light years, we then got a measured distance to distant galaxies. You've only got to observe a Cepheid variable in a distant galaxy. From its period, you can deduce its brightness and its absolute brightness and work out the distance of the galaxy. And this was one of the big stepping stones from parallax, which was the first method of measuring distance. Now, after that, of course, when Cepheids get too faint, you have to use supernova in their two types, type 1 and type 2, which have different light curves. And if you see a supernova in a distant galaxy, and you know it's a type 1 or type 2, they go off at the same critical point, they go bang. You know the distance of the galaxy.
Wow.
It's
so
quite important.
The biologist educated the astronomer, the astronomer is now educated the biologist. John, is it like the Cepheids, is that what they're called, candles? The stellar candles that they do that?
They're varying brightness, they've got down on that, It's not that flickering you see, that's the scintillation you see at night is just atmospheric disturbance. If you put an optical instrument on a star doing that, that scintillation disappears, but over a period of time you can measure relative brightness compared to stars by it that are fixed in brightness. You can estimate it, but then of course now they use fancy techniques in electronics to do it.
There's nothing like using the human eye, haven't
And the calculations and things it's mind-blowing to me.
I thought the journey, the sea journey, was it
Jean,
Oh yeah,
that was
That was
well,
thought I saw the Magellanic Cloud once when I was in British Honduras, but I'm not sure. You only see it from the Southern Hemisphere.
Yes.
They were named after Magellan, Portuguese explorer, of course.
But I wonder if, I was just going to say, I wonder if the guy that she shared a cabin with
Promising,
was aware. I wonder if there was any attraction to it to not say that there was a woman on board.
From what I've read, and for what other people had sort of studied into, trying to find out, that they're not sure whether he was in on it as well. But
There'd be
it's got to
you would think there'd be a regular reason for, wouldn't you? It's delicate as possible. There'd be certain problems. Yes, a lot of the crew were in on it as well.
But would they be? Because it was at a time when women didn't go, didn't go abroad, and also it was quite unlucky to have women on board.
Yes.
So
You kind of get away with it.
and why she'd want to?
Yeah.
Spend all that time, 3 years.
With a load of smelly blokes.
Yeah, because there was a lot, because there was a huge number on board the ship.
Yeah. There wouldn't be much watching going on, would there, really? A group of guys on board the ship.
Fresh water's a bit spare.
Yeah.
Drinking.
Yeah. Really big. So I think there's a few there, isn't there, that you can pick on and just get into and do some real research on. Linda, it's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you. Sorry, anybody else got any other
I was
questions?
just going to say, with the COVID epidemic, we've seen far more scientists reading about them and seeing them as well than we've ever done before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they did push some of the women ones, like the lady said.
Yeah.
And there's a cracking book that she's written with the other lady, Vaxxus, which is a brilliant book. It's on Radio 4 as well, on BBC Sounds. They did Book of the Week on it. And it's a story of how they came up with the vaccine. And it is just, if you get a chance, it's only an hour to listen. But it's just fantastic. Fantastic.
We've got a lot to be grateful for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, listen, it's been a super evening.
Okay.
Thank you again, really entertaining and got us thinking and appreciating more women in science. So thank you very much. Absolutely, yeah. Because 51%.
Even more reason.
Exactly. So we show our appreciation for Linda.
Thank you for listening.
So we'll be back again next month. We'll let you know by email the details when we've sorted it all out. If you could put your chairs away, sorry. Yeah.
Last time, I can't remember.
Yeah. Did we put them away altogether or not?
The chairs. Well, we got them out from round
Yeah, we'll sort it. Yeah, we'll sort it. Okay, so thank you much, and we'll see you next month.
Okay.